The skies of Eridani Prime burned red as the final orbital defense station cracked apart like dry bark under a storm of plasma. High above the planet, the Giovanni Imperium's warships moved like shadows, dark and ruthless, circling the dying world with cold precision. For weeks, the Coalition forces had fought to hold the system humans, Kelnari, Thrix, and even the secretive Valar, all united under a fragile pact, but the enemy had been too many, too fast, and too cruel. The Giovanni didn't just conquer, they erased. Cities were leveled, resistance networks wiped out, and anyone who didn't surrender was simply targeted from orbit and removed like insects. Inside the last command bunker hidden beneath the icy mountains of North Ridge, Commander Relic of the Kelnari Alliance watched the flickering holofeed with a pale expression, eyes fixed on the sight of their last battleship going silent. Static filled the room, drowning out the voice of the doomed captain. Around him, the few remaining officers stood frozen, the weight of loss pressing against their chests like stone. "It's over," someone whispered, though no one admitted who had said it. They all knew it anyway. The great Eridani Prime, once the hope of the outer colonies, was finished. The surface was crawling with Giovanni shock troops, and no more help was coming. The Coalition had sent distress calls, dozens of them, across every known relay, but with the network compromised and Earth silent for years, hope had faded long before the shields had. No one expected Earth to answer. No one expected humans to return. They had withdrawn from the galactic stage decades ago, after bitter wars and broken treaties, choosing isolation over further bloodshed. Some even believed they had given up space entirely, locking their gates and sealing their borders, becoming nothing but a whisper in alien archives. The Giovanni certainly believed it, and that belief had made them bold. Now, with the final relay station about to fall, Relic did the only thing left. He pressed the override on a hidden console. A last-ditch system, forgotten by most, and buried deep under bureaucratic locks. It linked to a dormant relay beacon built by humans long ago, designed to fire a one-way signal through unstable wormhole routes, too dangerous for most ships. It was a blind scream into the void, a message that might never reach anyone, but Relic activated it anyway, because it was better than waiting to die. The room filled with a low hum, then silence. No response. No light. Nothing but the echo of power draining from an old machine reaching across cold stars. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the mountain, carrying the scent of ash. Varawun Kal, supreme strategist of the Giovanni fleet, stood aboard his flagship, the Scourge of Dawn, admiring the fading resistance below. To him, the battle was not just won, it was conquered, claimed, owned. He had watched civilizations fall before, but none as disappointingly easy as this. He had prepared for glory, for a test worthy of his genius, but the Coalition had crumbled too quickly. Still, he allowed himself satisfaction. One more world under the banner of the Imperium. One more step toward dominance. He leaned toward the communications console and spoke softly, smugly, begin planet-wide cleansing. Make it efficient. Down on the surface, a bright light appeared briefly over the northern sky, then vanished. No one saw it clearly, not even Relic. But in the dark beyond known space, far from the war and the dying stars, a distant station blinked to life for the first time in decades. An old Earth beacon, nearly forgotten. And somewhere in the black, a signal reached an unexpected destination. A quiet fleet stirred, engines lighting in formation. A captain's eyes opened in the darkness of cryosleep. A message replayed, over and over, echoing through the chamber. Emergency code read. Coalition down. Giovanni threat active. Eridani Prime has fallen. No answer was spoken. None was needed. The ships began to move. Back on Eridani, as the last bunker sealed its doors and the sky turned to fire, Relic closed his eyes and whispered to himself, not in prayer, but in memory of old stories, old alliances, and one ancient name. Humanity. The ones who fought without fear. The ones who never surrendered. He didn't know if the message had reached them or if anyone still listened on Earth. But he remembered what the Giovanni had forgotten. When humans come late to a war, they don't come to negotiate. They come to end it. Far beyond the chaos of Eridani Prime, deep in a quiet corner of space few dared to chart, the long, dormant station known only as Outpost 17C buzzed with unexpected light. Hidden in the cold orbit of a dead gas giant, surrounded by debris and cloaked by electromagnetic fog, the station had been part of Earth's ancient warning system designed to receive only one kind of message, a cry for help. For years, nothing had stirred in its chambers except the hum of automated maintenance bots and the silent drifting of abandoned probes. But now, alarms echoed through its cold metal halls. A beacon from Eridani Prime, encoded with forgotten protocols and sealed in human voice patterns, had awakened something. The message had traveled through broken relays and half-collapsed wormholes, yet it arrived burned, incomplete but still screaming, "They've fallen," requesting immediate support. Hostiles overwhelming. Giovanni advancing. The AI running the station. Earth's fleet, long silent, began to stir. At the edge of human space, tucked inside a moon carved into a covert military base, hangars opened and sleek warships rolled out like silent giants shaking off dust. Commander Lena Torres, a woman once feared across the stars as the shield of Titan, stepped out of cryosleep with frost still on her armor and fire already in her eyes. It had been years since she'd led a mission, but as soon as she heard the message from Eridani, she understood. The silence had ended. Humanity had turned its back on the galaxy once, tired of bloodshed and betrayal from supposed allies. But that didn't mean they had gone soft. In the years of silence, they had built smarter ships, colder weapons, and systems designed not just to win wars, but to erase them completely. Torres stood before her crew, who were still waking up one by one, and said only one sentence: "The galaxy forgot who we are, let's remind them." While the fleet began to mobilize in shadows, the Giovanni continued their conquest. Their fleets moved fast across the stars, swallowing colonies like fire across dry wood. Systems that had once whispered about human strength now bent their knees before the Imperium, believing the old legends had faded like dust. On the flagship Scourge of Dawn, Veruan Kal ordered the next wave of attacks, unaware that something was already watching his fleet. In the dark between stars, small human scout ships, blacker than shadow and faster than thought, moved like ghosts. They left no trails. They sent no transmissions. They simply watched, recorded, and vanished before detection. One such ship, Hawk 9, drifted through Sector W9, a region the Giovanni had claimed just days earlier. It picked up strange energy patterns fluctuations that no one in the galaxy but humans would recognize. These were signs of excessive shield use, internal power rerouting, and the unmistakable decay patterns of Giovanni drive cores. That meant something important was out there, an armory, perhaps, or a forward command station. Commander Jace Niren, pilot of Hawk 9, reported the data back to the Deep Fleet and waited in the black, watching silently. But then something went wrong. The feed cut off mid-transmission. The Hawk had disappeared. No wreckage. No emergency beacon. Just silence. The only message received from the scout ship was short and chilling. "They're not ready for what's coming, but we are." It was all the confirmation Commander Torres needed. Something was happening behind the Giovanni lines, something the rest of the galaxy couldn't see. And only humans were close enough, mad enough, and prepared enough to investigate. As her fleet curved through the void using hidden slip-space tunnels designed to avoid detection, the tension on board rose. These weren't just soldiers, they were specialists, most of them trained in orbital dropshock missions, AI warfare, and deep system sabotage. Each one had grown up in a world where humanity was mocked, feared, or forgotten. Each one wanted to change that. Back in known space, rumors had begun to spread. A mining outpost in the Druss Belt reported seeing strange ships, shaped like nothing in the Giovanni database. A pirate lord with ties to the Imperium swore his convoy was ambushed by vessels that moved without drive signatures. "Like ghosts," he said before disappearing 2 days later. The Giovanni ignored these reports, calling them superstition. But Varun Kyle didn't ignore them. He had studied humanity's old wars, though most records were redacted or destroyed. He remembered the story of the Battle of Altorus, where a single Earth dreadnought had disabled a fleet 5 times its size. He remembered the whispers of Project Nightfall, an experimental Earth fleet that was never confirmed to exist, ships that moved without being seen, struck without being tracked, and never left survivors. And now, too many things were happening that he couldn't explain. It was like the shadows had come alive. Tora's knew fear would work in their favor. That's why she ordered the first strike on Station Bellatrix, a Giovanni comms relay deep in Sector W8. Using infiltration pods, her team boarded the station silently and disabled its data core in under 4 minutes. No alarms. No casualties. No trace. When the next Giovanni patrol arrived, they found the walls marked with one symbol, an ancient human emblem, the double-barred phoenix, Earth's old mill double-pillared crest. Varun Kal watched the footage in silence, the firelight of Eridani still reflected in his eyes. "This isn't a rebellion," he muttered. "This is a resurrection." Somewhere, deep inside the blackest parts of space, humanity's fleet continued to move. Not rushing. Not shouting. Just closing in with patient fury. And as they did, the galaxy began to remember the old stories, the ones told in hushed tones, the ones too frightening to believe. The stories about the species that would not bow. The ones who built their weapons not just to protect themselves, but to make sure no one would ever dare to strike first again. In the void, ghosts moved. But they weren't ghosts. They were humans. And they were coming. The stars over Argol Nexus looked calm, peaceful even, like jewels scattered across black velvet. But every ship in the Giovanni fleet knew something was wrong. There was tension in the air, in the sensors, in the minds of every officer aboard the Scourge of Dawn, as High Strategist Varun Kale stood at the command deck, staring at the static-filled space beyond the observation windows. Patrols had gone missing. Outposts were vanishing without warning. And now, long-range scanners were detecting strange distortions and slipspace ripples that didn't follow any known path or pattern, like someone was tearing holes in reality and moving through them with precision. The Giovanni were no fools, and their technology was among the finest in the galaxy. But whatever this was, it made no sound, left no trace, and triggered an ancient warning in Varun Kal's mind. This wasn't just resistance, it was a strategy. Just as he was about to send a recon unit deeper into the sector, something happened that made every officer freeze. A sudden slipspace rupture, right in the middle of the fleet formation, without warning or the usual gravitational pulse. It was like the void had been quietly cut open. A ship emerged. No, not just one, an entire formation, sleek and black, each vessel humming with quiet menace, their hulls marked with a forgotten symbol, a silver phoenix with burning wings. The Giovanni fleet scrambled, alarms screaming, guns locking on targets. But before they could fire, a single message came through every open channel, translated into 100 languages, not shouted but spoken in a calm, steady human voice. "This system is under human protection. Withdraw immediately." The silence that followed was heavier than any weapon fire. Varun Kal stepped forward, eyes narrowing, voice low as he ordered his fleet to prepare for battle. To him, this was a bluff, a remnant of a forgotten species pretending to be what they once were. He gave the order to open fire. The Giovanni ships launched a coordinated attack, plasma beams lashing through space, missiles streaking toward the human fleet, but nothing hit. The human ships moved in perfect formation, dodging as one, like a single organism guided by thought, not commands. Return fire came instantly, and it was surgical. A destroyer's engines exploded from a railgun round that pierced through 6 layers of armor. Another vessel lost all power as EMP drones crawled into its hull and disabled its core. One by one, ships fell, not in grand explosions, but with eerie silence, like someone had simply turned them off. And still, the humans didn't speak again. They didn't boast. They didn't gloat. They acted with precision, with purpose, as if they had already played this battle in their minds, and were now simply following step. Varun Kyle stood frozen, watching his battle plans crumble in seconds. These weren't random rebels or desperate survivors. These were trained warriors, and their silence was louder than any victory speech. Commander Lena Torres, standing aboard the human flagship Iron Requiem, watched the battle unfold with steady eyes. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't a game. It was a reminder. For years, Earth had watched in silence, refusing to join the squabbling politics of the galaxy, but that didn't mean they had forgotten how to fight. No, they had spent those years building, planning, remembering. Every human officer in the fleet had grown up hearing stories of betrayal, the way the galaxy had turned on Earth during the last Great War, using them as shields, then blaming them for the fallout. Humanity had vanished from sight, but they hadn't vanished from purpose. And now they were here, not for revenge, but for justice. As the Giovanni fleet began to retreat, Veruan Kyle tried to issue a regroup order, but interference jammed his comms. Human cyber warfare protocols were burrowing into his systems, disabling command layers, locking weapons, rerouting power. In under 10 minutes, what had started as a show of force turned into a humiliation. From deep space, more human ships arrived, not with fanfare, but with intent. Smaller vessels docked with coalition outposts, repairing comms, restoring power, deploying supplies. The fractured resistance across nearby systems began receiving messages, again brief but clear: Earth stands with you. For the first time in weeks, the galaxy saw hope. Not from diplomats, not from noble speeches, but from black steel, fast engines, and weapons that whispered one thing to every enemy: you should have left them alone. Back aboard the Scourge of Dawn, Varun Kal stared at the last message left behind by a retreating human drone. It hovered outside his viewport, displayed a single line of text, then vanished into the dark. The message read, "You thought the battle was over. We're just getting started." He didn't speak. He didn't order pursuit. Instead, for the first time in his career, he felt the cold chill of defeat, not just in body, but in spirit. The humans weren't fighting like conquerors. They were fighting like protectors, with nothing to prove and everything to defend. Across the stars, the name Earth began to spread again. Colonies whispered about the return. Pirate bands disappeared. Smugglers turned quiet. And every world that had once dismissed humanity now watched the skies a little more closely. Because ghosts had returned not of the dead, but of warriors long underestimated. And those ghosts now carried banners. Banners made of shadow, stars, and steel. The declaration had been made. Humanity was back, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war changed in ways no one expected, and it happened faster than any strategist could predict. Just weeks after humanity returned to the stars, entire sectors of space that had once been under the firm control of the Giovanni Imperium began to shift, not through massive battles or endless bloodshed, but through precision, strategy, and fear. Where once the Giovanni fleet had advanced without resistance, now they hesitated at the edge of every system, uncertain if the black beyond held a sleeping human warship or a hidden satellite capable of tearing through their command networks. The coalition, once scattered and broken, started to rise again, their communication lines re-established by human tech teams who operated like ghosts, arriving silently, fixing entire infrastructures, and vanishing before anyone could say thank you. For the first time since Eridani Prime fell, Allied leaders held real meetings again, this time with a single seat at the center reserved for Earth. But humanity didn't send politicians. They sent soldiers, engineers, and tacticians who spoke plainly, offered help freely, and demanded nothing in return except that the Giovanni be stopped, not just for revenge, but because allowing tyranny to grow would only bring greater. Commander Lena Torres knew what was coming. Their early victories had struck fear into the Giovanni, but fear only worked for so long. The enemy would regroup, study their tactics, and come back harder. That's why she pushed the offensive before the Giovanni could breathe. She directed her fleet into Sector Galen, a critical supply route that connected 6 systems under Giovanni control. The coalition had tried to reclaim it before and failed. This time, it took less than a day. Using advanced stealth frigates and AI-guided drones, the human task force severed communication nodes, jammed scanners, and destroyed supply depots before the Giovanni knew they were under attack. A single human destroyer, the Silent March, took on 3 enemy cruisers and won not through brute force, but through a mix of decoy systems, predictive targeting, and old-fashioned human guts. As news of the Galen offensive spread, something even more unexpected happened. The oppressed worlds began to fight back. Colonies that had remained silent for years suddenly launched uprising. Rebel cells hidden in mining belts struck at Giovanni depots. Civilians once too afraid to speak rose in the name of Earth, inspired by what they had seen. Not everyone fought with guns. Some hacked comm relays, others smuggled supplies, and a few simply sent out messages of hope. That hope, once fragile, now burned like fire. Meanwhile, Veruun Kyle sat inside the fortified war council on Rovax Prime, surrounded by his commanders, who argued and pointed fingers, blaming each other for losses they could not explain. They spoke of traitors, of weak allies, of freak chances, but none dared say the truth aloud. It wasn't luck. It was Earth. Veruun Kyle remained silent, his mind turning like a storm. He had underestimated them. Everyone had. Humanity had been dismissed as a fallen power, broken by past wars and lost in its own isolation. But they had returned, not weaker, but smarter, faster, sharper. And with them came something the Giovanni could not fight directly: inspiration. The coalition fought better now, more unified. Even their weapons had improved, upgraded by Earth engineers who shared knowledge freely, building hybrid systems that outmatched anything the Imperium had fielded in years. One by one, the systems near the core of the war zone began to slip from Giovanni control. Entire fleets refused to engage in areas where human forces were detected. Recruitment among the Giovanni worlds began to falter, their propaganda no longer strong enough to erase what people were seeing with their own eyes: human ships hovering silently over liberated planets, their crews dropping food and medicine before leaving without demands. It was not a conquest. It was a rescue, and it terrified the enemy. Still, the war was far from won. On the edge of Drenhal Rift, the Giovanni regrouped, building a trap that targeted the very confidence Earth had sparked. They leaked false data about a high-value prisoner camp, knowing humanity would act. And they were right. Commander Torres authorized Operation Emberfall, sending in a combined human coalition team to extract civilians and rebel leaders believed to be held there. But when the strike force arrived, they found no prisoners, only mines, automated cannons, and cloaked ships waiting in ambush. It was a massacre in the making. Yet even then, the tide refused to turn in the Giovanni's favor. The human response was immediate and brutal. Within moments of the ambush beginning, a hidden second wave of Earth ships emerged from subspace, launched without direct orders by an AI named Aegis, programmed to respond when human lives were in danger. Aegis didn't wait for authorization. It unleashed a counterstrike so precise and merciless that even Veruun Kyle, watching from his war room in Rovax, felt the chill of its tactics. The Giovanni ships were overwhelmed not by numbers, but by coordination. Every weakness in their formation was exploited, every error punished. The trap became a slaughter, but not for the humans. When the operation was over, Earth didn't celebrate. They didn't send messages or raise flags. They simply collected their wounded, buried their dead, and kept moving. That silence spoke louder than any speech. It told the galaxy, we are here and we're not going away. Across the stars, the tide turned not because Earth demanded loyalty, but because it had earned respect. Old enemies of the Giovanni, long scattered and afraid, began contacting coalition leaders. Hidden factions reached out to Earth's shadow fleet. The galaxy that once watched in silence now began to speak, and those who had once ruled with fear realized fear no longer worked. The fall of Eridani Prime had lit the fire. The return of humanity had turned it into a storm. Now the storm was spreading, and the Giovanni were running out of safe ground. The stars above Rovax Prime burned brighter than ever before, but none of it brought warmth to the cold silence that had fallen across the Giovanni War Council. What once had been the heart of a ruthless empire now pulsed with panic. Veruun Kyle stood motionless, staring at the massive holo map before him, lines of fire spreading system by system, red blinking into orange, orange into white, all of it signaling one undeniable truth: the front was gone. Humanity had shattered it, not with overwhelming numbers, but with relentless precision, turning every Giovanni counterstrike into failure and every stronghold into a tomb. Fleet after fleet was vanishing from long-range scans. Communications were full of static. Reports came in late, often incomplete, and always the same enemy unknown, tactics unexpected, outcomes disastrous. Veruin Kal no longer gave speeches. He no longer threatened subordinates or barked orders. Instead, he listened. And what he heard was the sound of a war slipping from his fingers like dust in a storm. Across the sector, Earth's black armored fleets moved like whispers in the void, silent and deadly, each engagement lasting minutes, each retreating enemy force leaving behind wreckage and confusion. The humans didn't follow traditional strategy. They didn't hold territory or chase after glory. They fought with purpose, striking only when needed and disappearing the moment the job was done. Their message had never changed. This is not conquest. This is correction. The Giovanni had believed the humans were acting out of revenge, that they had returned from exile to punish the galaxy for old betrayals. But now, watching the chaos unfold, Veruin Kal realized the terrible truth: this had never been their battle. It had always belonged to Earth. The Imperium had merely picked a fight with the wrong ghosts. While Veruin Kal scrambled to hold what was left of his empire, a final message arrived through a hacked channel, encoded in ancient Earth dialects and broadcast to every faction across the galaxy. It was not long, not angry, but it rang through the stars like thunder before a storm. We did not come to fight for territory. We came to end the lie. That lie, the one that said Earth had fallen, that humans had turned inward, that they were too fractured, too proud, too emotional to ever rise again, had been told for generations. Now the galaxy knew the truth. The final stage of the war came without warning. The skies above Arcanus Gate, the last major Giovanni defensive station guarding their core worlds, lit up as thousands of objects dropped out of slipspace. They weren't just warships. They were relief vessels, repair drones, communications, hubs, and modular bases of full reconstruction force, launched at once to take control not only of victory, but of what came after. The station's commander hesitated, thinking maybe it was a trick, some kind of false signal. But it wasn't. Earth had already prepared for what followed conquest, and that was what made them different. They didn't just win battles. They planned peace. On the ground, resistance collapsed, not because of fear, but because local forces saw human medics tending to wounded civilians, coalition engineers repairing power grids, and AI-guided bots distributing food and water. In less than a week, the gate fell not to weapons, but to will. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the human flagship Iron Requiem, Commander Lina Torres stood quietly as her officers reported the final wave of systems coming online. Coalition leaders had already begun formal talks about a new alliance, one no longer led by fear, but by shared survival. Earth had declined leadership, stating they had no interest in ruling, only in restoring balance. Their ships would remain only as long as necessary. Lina didn't smile, even as the galaxy began to heal. She knew it wasn't over. War never truly ended, it only changed faces. But for now, the message had been delivered in fire and steel, in precision and silence, in aid and action. Humanity had reminded the galaxy of a forgotten truth, that unity, when paired with courage and clarity, could rewrite destiny. Back on Rovax Prime, Veruin Kal stood alone in the war chamber, all his commanders either missing or dead, his empire in ruin. The last screen blinked with static until a new signal appeared, one final human message. There was no face, only a single sentence, delivered with that same calm, steady tone. The battle was never yours to win. And with that, the screen faded to black. Across the stars, worlds once occupied began to celebrate freedom. Children grew up hearing stories not of human destruction, but of human return, of dark ships arriving like myths, of soldiers who fought without cruelty, and of voices that spoke not of conquest, but of redemption. In time, the name Earth no longer sparked fear, but hope. And those who had once watched from the shadows now looked to the skies and whispered to themselves, "They came when we needed them most." Because the truth, known now by all, was simple: the battle had never been the Dravani's to win. It had always belonged to humanity. And humanity had come not to conquer, but to restore what the galaxy had forgotten: honor, unity, and the will to fight for those who could not.